Hey everybody, this is Rudy for Best Investor. I'm here with your Tuesday edition of Occidental Petroleum. It's August the 25th, and today what we're going to do is take a quick look at the institutional buyers and sellers of Occidental during the previous quarter. First, as a quick look, we take a look at the summary of Occidental. And what I'm going to do here is not spend too much time on the actual summary of the stock itself, but I want to really focus in on this little number down here. Not some of the short interest, but more the institutions. So almost 70% of Occidental is held by institutions. And I thought we should take a look and see who these big guys are who are invested in Oxy, because it might give you some ideas, not just in terms of who you may trust or not trust in terms of their entry or exit positions in Oxy or the trades, but also just to see how they actually traded quarter to quarter, because obviously their filings are public, so it's easy for us to track. It's also interesting to note that Occidental's historical volatility is above 100%, so the stock's been very volatile. So let's take a look and see why. Some of these are going to be quite repetitive, so I'm going to go through them as quickly as I can. I've got quite a few of them, but I'm going to kind of whiz through them. CLAL Insurance Enterprises reported a almost 9% increase in ownership of Occidental. We can see in the previous quarter, so they had filed a previous quarter statement where they had about 1.1 million shares, and now they have about 1.2 million shares. So they've added about 100,000 or exactly 100,000 shares to their holding. But the holdings value, as you can see, has gone from 14 million to about 22 million. So if you look at the change in shares, it's only 8.77%. But if you look at the change in value, it's 61.2% during the second quarter. Nice trade. Prudential reported a 16.67 decrease in ownership. So let's take a look at this one in a little bit more depth. They owned 1,020,000 shares or thereabouts as at the end of June, and in their previous filing they had 1.224 million. So they sold 200,000 shares during the last quarter. So if you look at the change in shares, they're down 16.67%, but if you look at the change in value, they're up 31.67% during the second quarter. Nice trade, Prudential. National Pension Service reported a 7.1% decrease in their holdings of Occidental. They previously had, in the previous quarter, 1.293, so almost 1.3 million shares. And as of August 11th, they had 1.2 million shares, so they sold about 90,000 shares. Their change in shares, as I said, is negative 7.16, so they've decreased their holdings in Occidental and increased their value of Occidental holdings during Q2 by 46%. Nice trade, National Pension Service. Raymond James shows a decrease quarter over quarter of 37%. If we look at their previous filing from the previous quarter, they had 1.318 million shares, which was reduced to just 824,000 shares. But you can see the corresponding value quarter to quarter is about the same. So although they had a change in shares of negative 37.45, the actual value of their Occidental holdings remained relatively flat. They also hedged their position by taking some derivatives in the underlying security, and as of the last filing date, which was July 28th, Raymond James held 32,500 call options valued at about $7,000. Interesting trade from Raymond James. The value of the holdings is pretty much the same, so they're probably just doing some cost basis averaging, or averaging the weighting of equities in their portfolio. Principal Financial I'm nearly done. I've got maybe another 2 after this, and that's it. Principal reported a 22% increase in their ownership of Occidental. They had gone from holding 1.3 million shares to about 1.6 million shares, so up almost 300,000 shares. This looks like an extraordinary nice trade for Prudential. They increased their holdings in shares by 22%, but the increase in value by 93%, so almost doubling their investors' money in one quarter. Good job, Prudential Financial. AllianceBernstein, this is an interesting one for me because I also own AllianceBernstein long, primarily because of the dividend of almost 10% that you can earn on AllianceBernstein. So AllianceBernstein is actually one of my FIRE stocks. So FIRE, in case you don't know, is financially independent and retirement early. I have another video on AllianceBernstein. If you look for it, you'll find it. But they reported a 6.8% decrease in ownership of Occidental. And for the quarter, the previous quarter, they had 1.44 million shares. And last quarter, that had dropped by about 100,000 shares to 1.3 million shares. However, the value went from 16.5 million the previous quarter to 24.5 million this quarter. So even though they decreased their shares by 7%, they increased the value of their holdings by 47% during Q2. Good job, AllianceBernstein. First Trust Advisors shows a 41.48% decrease in ownership of OXY. They had 2.4 million shares. They're down to 1.4 million shares, so that means they sold almost 1 million shares. However, the value of the holdings dropped from 28 million to down to just 26 million, which means even though the shares, the holdings that they had in shares went down by 41.5%, the value of Occidental in their portfolio was only reduced by 7.5%. So some nice timing on that one as well by First Trust Advisors. Once again, good job. So far, I don't have any negative comments to say about any of these. And, UBS is the last one here, and then I'm going to wrap it up. So they showed a 41.5% increase in ownership. The previous quarter, they had 1.4 million shares. And then last quarter, they had 1.988 million shares, so 580,000 shares that they purchased. They previously disclosed $16,000 in Occidental holdings, up to about 36. So the change in value, 41. And let me just get my eraser here because I'm scribbling all over the place. So the change in shares for the quarter is 41%, but the change in value 123% during Q2. They're also hedging their position. They've got 45,000 call options and 737,000 put options, respectively valued at just under $1 million, and the put options valued at $13.5 million. It'll be interesting to see what happens with this trade. The jury's out because we'll have to see what happens when they either exercise that call option, which is a right to exercise it, but you don't have to, and then exercise the puts. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up here, and what I wanted to share with you is, in addition to the institutional holdings and where they're at, I wanted to remind you that there's always someone on the other side of every trade. So if you think you're really smart because you are acquiring more stock in Occidental, just remember that somebody else is selling when you are buying. And conversely, if you think that's it, I'm going to exit this position, I'm getting out of it, it's too risky for me and exceeds my risk tolerance levels, and well, otherwise maybe I just need some cash, or this is not going to go anywhere. Remember, when you're selling, there's someone else who's buying. So that's it, folks. It's Rudy for Best Investor signing off. I hope you enjoyed this one. It's a quick one, a short one. Stay safe, keep well. Thanks for watching. See you later. Bye-bye.